Hi, Lauren.
Hi.
Oh, you look lovely.
Oh, thank you. I'm having people over for dinner later, so thought I'd make a bit of effort.
Yeah, you look great.
Thank
Uh,
you.
yeah, thanks for taking the time to have a chat. I'm just gonna.
That's great. Feels very indulgent, like talking about myself.
Oh, it's so great though, because I mean, a lot of what I'm doing is just trying to help people use their finances better, right? And find the ethical options for their finances and be an activist with their
Mm,
finances. But actually, there's plenty of people that might feel like actually working in the industry and creating change from the inside is something that they want to
yeah.
do as well. So I just think your story is really cool. So I hope you think it's cool too. So I just wanted to, yeah, have a chat and just see if you wanted to share that. And I suppose for me, it kind of starts with share action and your time there.
Mm.
So yeah, do you want to talk about share action, what they do, why you or how you ended up working there, and talk about some of the things that you actually achieved with your team while you were there, some of the cool stuff that we can share with people.
Yeah. I agree. Your action's great. So I think I ended up there because I knew I wanted to work in kind of sustainability business, that kind of. And then I actually did an internship at a stockbroker in an ESG team after my master's. And that just opened my eyes to responsible investment and how cool it was, and how there's this whole nother layer, not just of the kind of CSR business sustainability stuff, but this whole nother aspect of things. So then I think after that, Show Action was just a perfect fit, really, because it was, a group of relatively young, fun, passionate people with loads of opportunity, loads of ideas. But in terms of what they do, I mean, I think it's changed so much. So I was there like 5 years ago or something now. And then, the conversations I was having with pension schemes was literally just, this is climate change. It's a financial risk. It's important. And it was so early days. And now Share Action is, a kind of a specialist on the sorts of investment, and actually, the industry is going to them. So I think in terms of what we achieved, so my role changed quite a lot, and I think that's just great working in NGOs. You get so much responsibility, and you have to grasp it. And I started off on kind of more campaigny side with individuals, getting them involved in their pension, make sure they knew how it worked, and then kind of transitioned to actually working more with the industry itself, and kind of by the end, kind of some more kind of supporting them, almost more in a kind of consultancy type role. I mean, it was still very, campaigny, of course, but it was more like by the time I left, we were kind of more on the same page. So it was kind of like, how can we actually do this? And this is how you could get better, rather than please just think about climate change and educate yourself. So it was a great journey.
Yeah. Um, so you were there for how long? Is it 5 years?
So four at the end, yeah.
4 years in the
But I've
end.
been at Scotch Widows now for nearly a year.
Has it been a year nearly already?
Yeah,
Gosh, that has actually flown by because I
I
remember
know.
seeing your kind of your post on LinkedIn to say that you'd made the move, and I was just
Yeah,
like,
I
oh
know.
yeah, that's cool. Um, so share action to Scottish Widows, like how did that happen, and what did you have to do to kind of convince them that hiring an activist was a good idea?
So to be honest, I think the conversation has changed so much over the last 4 or 5 years. The schemes and asset managers just want support. They want to know how to do it. And I think Share Action's so good at the kind of best practice that, because Scottish Widows wants to be one of the best, it's like, well, we need to bring people in who know what best practice is and know the market and are willing to actually challenge things. I think that's been my remit from the start, and my team's remit actually, that we're there to do things differently. We're there to try and push things, and that's lovely. And I think, personally, I mean, I loved working for an NGO, but it's hard that often you don't always see the impact. So whilst it's an impact-driven organisation, you know, organisations don't say, "Oh, we did this big thing, like we did Extraction told us to, like thanks so much." Like that never happens. So you never always get you get a feeling, but you don't always know. And I think personally, I really wanted to just be doing the thing myself for a bit and actually facing the challenges myself and trying to get around them myself. So that I think I was keen to do like probably a year before I left Action. I was already thinking about this be like at the other side, and I think I was keen that it was the right asset owner. I didn't really want to go into asset management. I felt like too far away. But asset owners, I think, they're kind of unique in their position. That you know, we still go get good returns for members and all that, but you can be a bit more, you're not as close to the company, so you're not as close to the upsetting those relationships. You can be a bit more kind of ballsy, I think. So it's quite a nice fit.
So what does your day look like, and what were the types of skills that you had to learn quite quickly to be able to do this kind of on the other side of the fence?
So I'm a responsible investment manager, and in the team there's 5 of us. So we have someone focusing on member engagement, kind of 2 people doing the more ESG integration side, so looking at exclusions and you know what companies we invested in net zero and the climate side of things. And then me and my the head of stewardship, Shipra, work on stewardship. So it's kind of a mixture at the moment between getting kind of policies established and processes established and things, stewardship integrated into kind of the meetings and processes that are already existing, and then trying to kind of figure out what our direct stewardship is like. So that includes, we do a lot of working with asset managers, and I think that's because we're such a big pension provider, we have quite a lot of sway there. So we had the announcement of day BlackRock allowing us to vote in a pooled fund, which is quite a kind of new thing. And I realise this probably sounds really technical, which isn't really good for a younger like professional audience, but I'll try and explain. The responsible investment gets so jargony so quickly. I hate it. But yeah, so it's kind of mixed with working with asset managers to kind of push them to engage companies better, and also we're doing a bit of the engagement ourselves. So I published last month a report on cognitive diversity on boards, which is all about kind of saying at board level across all companies, we need a really good mix of people, and people with different experiences and people with different ideas to kind of tackle the sustainability crises that we have. So, you know, ideally on a board of a fashion retailer, would you have somebody who's got experience of supply chains in Indonesia, for example? Like, how diverse in thinking and experience is your board? And that's really interesting conversation, and one that we're trying to kind of lead. So much, like there's so many different sustainability themes. I think we're trying to establish like how can we contribute in a kind of meaningful way that isn't just kind of adding to other things that other people are doing. But it's a bit more kind of additional. So it's very new. We're kind of like figuring it all out really, which is really nice. So nice position.
Yeah, no, that does sound really cool. So I guess you're just kind of creating all these new policies and just setting the direction of all this stuff, which does feel new weirdly, but it isn't, right? This is kind of stuff that we've all been campaigning for years, particularly around climate change. Just talking a little bit then about the stewardship that you just brought up there. So stewardship, that's speaking to investee companies, that's voting at company AGMs, that's using your shareholder powers to have an impact. So do you do that directly with the companies, or are you asking your fund managers to make sure that they're doing it, and are you setting the standards for what you want them to engage with the companies on?
So both is the short answer. And it's a really interesting question actually, because I think it's a bit, and for us as well, it's, it's trying, we are a big client, and therefore we can influence the market and we can influence our big asset managers. But at the same time, we want to be kind of leading. We don't want to kind of give it all down to them. So it's definitely a balance of, and I think that's probably what's the new aspect of it, because I think a lot of the really kind of best practice asset owners which are out there, a lot of them have in-house asset management, so they're much closer to the kind of investment decisions and the companies, whereas I think us and a lot of the bigger pension providers or master trusts out there, they are separated, and it's us trying to figure out, okay, well, we are a bit more like further down the chain, and therefore what is our influence, like how can we make the impact? And I think actually that asset manager relationship is key, and I think we're quite kind of conscious that we don't want to take too much kind of control back. So with voting, we don't necessarily want to say, okay, right, we'll take all voting in house, like we'll just do it ourselves, because then we kind of lose the influence on the asset manager and kind of holding them to account. But I think at the same time, doing a bit of direct engagement with companies. So we're doing a bit of that on cognitive diversity, and we've got a couple of other themes that I think we'd like to kind of get into in time, and maybe a couple of companies that we could focus on. I think that adds weight to our understanding. And also kind of puts us a bit more on a level playing field, because if an asset manager is saying, oh yeah, you know, we spoke to Amazon and they said this, or we could say, well, we spoke to another company and they said this, and that's actually not. It just gives you a bit more kind of like power, I think, if you're also like in that game. So yeah, both basically, which is nice. I enjoy both of it.
Yeah, it makes sense. That's really cool. And what has sort of surprised you, or what does that look like actually, speaking to those companies directly? Because I think a lot of people that have kind of campaigned on the outside, they kind of see it as this sort of tea and biscuits, nicey chat, that and sustainability and any of that stuff kind of gets left to right at the end of the conversation and doesn't really mean anything, and no change is actually influenced. So what, now that you're actually in there and doing it, like what does it look like? How, you know, you schedule a meeting with the, who is it? I mean, and then what happens next?
So we've only heard a few, because it is quite difficult actually to get a meeting to begin with. So that's, I think, and that's interesting coming from Share Action, because obviously it was always difficult to Share Action because we're an NGO, but actually, you know, even on the other side, there's so many asset managers and asset owners asking for meetings, asking for all different major things, that it's still not, you know, that easy to just ring people up and it's the same, and there's the same interaction. You are trying to build a bit of a relationship. Like, you can't just go in there and say you need to do this now, because they're going to be like, well, thanks, but we won't speak to you again. There's no kind of, so yeah, it's interesting actually. It's quite hard, I would say. I feel like we're quite early in that direct engagement, and trying to establish a couple of those relationships and establish actually what companies aren't kind of already getting so much attention. And like, you know, we've sent a lot of letters out, and what's interesting is there's quite a similar pattern to like in process that Share Action would follow. So they would send a letter to companies, they'd try and get a meeting, they'd try and get a few investors involved. It's quite a similar process on the other side. Like, it doesn't feel that different, I think. And even with the conversations of asset managers, like, it's not that different than the conversations Share Action would have. It's still like the same challenging questions. I think the probably difference is that we are a client, so if we want to be a bit more heated, we obviously can. But then Share Action could go to the press if they wanted, and, you know, take that route. So it's much more similar than I thought it would be, actually.
Oh, that's
really
interesting. Yeah. And you know, so when it comes to engaging with the companies, what do you think are the kind of main leverage points? You know, is it the fact that you're invested in them and could divest if you wanted to? Like, what is it that's actually pushing them to listen to you, to take the meetings and to listen to you and to apply the change that you're asking for?
That's a good question. So I think in the climate space, I still think the kind of divestment engagement is really powerful, and it's not obviously something you can just do quickly. But I think definitely the fact that a lot of pension schemes, including ourselves, have tilts now, so at least we're kind of tilting away from that high carbon sector. So we've already kind of started that kind of process of like, we think you're a bit risky. I'm literally tilting as well. We're going to move away from you. And I think that kind of, if that builds, that is powerful. And I think they've seen, we've got exclusions around coal and stuff. So I think that is, and it sounds like, with my kind of sustainability hat on, it's like coal is like not enough. Like that's like the minimum. But the reality is when you're, a big kind of passive investor in the defined contribution space, like actually coal is a good first step, because the industries generally just tend to mirror the mirror the world, and that oil and gas is still such a big part of the world. It's hard to kind of take a really different route from that. And also, we're always talking internally, like if we do reduce oil and gas investment significantly, then we're just going to have more Facebooks and Amazons in our top holdings, and I don't really want them either. So I think personally, I find it quite difficult actually, like what that kind of how much we should exclude, how much we shouldn't. But I think the main thing is trying to use it as a threat with the engagement. But I think it's over a few years. I think it doesn't really work over a year because it takes so long to engage. So yeah, it's hard. I think is my short answer. I think we're trying to work out what those most powerful levers are, and yeah, we're just keen to kind of get more involved in like the resolutions and stuff and the voting on resolutions. I think that's what Engine number 1 did this year, with so Exxon and Chevron, I want to say it was, it was so powerful that if we can do more of that, that'd be great.
So just kind of thinking about those on the outside that really want to see more action and want to see it now. So do you think, so now that you're on the inside, do you think that what part of what's taken so long is just, it is so difficult to engage with those companies because they're engaging with so many different investors, and actually the process just unfortunately takes longer than it should? Is that part of the reason?
I think that's a factor. I mean, my personal view when it comes to climate is just that we need more government action until, I feel like there's so much regulation actually on the pensions industry in terms of reporting and aligning, but that's only a small part of the picture. The companies themselves don't actually have to do anything, because there's so many like invested interests. I think actually, it's quite, I don't know, and then it's hard not to just talk about capitalism and the kind of issues of that, because it is still just such a capitalist world, and it's still so short term in terms of just the ideology. And I think actually the responsible investment world is trying to, I think we spent so many years trying to just kind of say that ESG was material and these things were financial risk. And now it's almost like, okay, everyone believes that, but we're trying to change the narrative now to say, actually, it's not just about those financially material short-term issues. If you want to increase employees' wages, then if you look purely on the balance sheet for that year, then that's going to be a cost, isn't it? So, but you do increase employees' wages because that's the right thing to do, and they'll spend more on the economy, and they'll feel happier, but all those effects are kind of more long term and more nuanced. And I think it's similar with the climate, that we're all going to die, aren't we, if we don't do something. But that it's very hard to, I think, get that way of thinking like through the whole financial system, and into companies themselves. So yeah, I think the amount of conversations, I think, is a factor, but I think it's a much broader, bigger problem that we're trying to change our whole society and economy. And
everyone's in their own little bubble of like, oh, what little things can we do? But positively, I think asset owners have an increasing voice, and their voice is stronger, I think, than a lot of the asset managers. It is much more about that long term. What will members will retire into? I think, especially with a lot of pension members being quite young, so they will literally retire until like the 2050. I think that kind of this is actually their future and their investments, and it's a bit more connected rather than just the asset managers kind of making a return each year and working on quite that short-term basis. I'm not sure that really answered your question, but I think it's a big conversation.
Yeah, so it is that bigger conversation, isn't it? And I think that's something that's kind of coming up now because of the COP talks and some of the announcements that have been made. And there's some really positive stuff, I think, around particularly around the mandatory net zero transition plans that financial institutions and listed companies have to now make by 2023. So that's a good move, but there are other people that are saying that it's still profitable to trade in carbon, and so we need carbon pricing, we need a carbon tax, so that polluters are paying for the damage that they're causing, whether that damage transpires now or sometime in the future. So I guess there is that sort of that kind of tax issue as well. It's like, how do you get companies to internalize the costs? It's getting a bit technical now, so I might have to explain all of this like on a fact sheet or something. So do you have any specific things that you're hoping Scottish Widows will do or achieve in, like, say, in the next 5 years? What are the things that you would like to influence there?
So I'm really enjoying it's kind of just started the Occupational Pension Scheme Council. So that was set up by DWP off the back of the asset manager report, was it? And that's really cool because it's kind of linked to what I said before. So I feel like there's quite a big group of asset owners who want to do something, don't necessarily have asset management in-house, but do want to do the right thing and do want to make a difference. And, we're coming together and I think working on things. And I'm really enjoying that. And that's really, I think, it's going to be quite powerful because we can actually go to asset managers as a kind of collective, as clients, and say, like, these are our demands, and that's fantastic. And I think that will grow over the years. And then personally, I'm really keen to just get more involved in resolutions as well. I think, we need a bit of time to kind of bed in as a team and to work out, what it is we want to do. But I mean, I'm hoping that I find the role of just asset owners really interesting, and I think the resolution part is potentially something that they can really be involved in because they've got less conflicts of interest because they're further away from the company, and it's just the thing is that it's that balance between like doing that general oversight and reporting across everything, which a lot of the regulator requires, and actually having the time to do. Because resolutions and stuff are so time consuming, having the time to get into like the detail of a company and actually do that work. So that's a balance, I think. But I'm excited. I think, we're such a big asset owner. I hope that through this collaboration that we can kind of open doors to other asset owners as well that are a bit smaller and don't necessarily kind of have the team, the responsible investment team, but they, the fact that now BlackRock is allowing clients to use different voting policies, now other asset owners can do that too. And, I think that's really good that we can actually make that difference.
Can you quickly?
So I'm excited about that.
Yeah, no, that sounds really cool. Can you quickly just explain what you mean by resolutions so people know what you're talking about?
So resolutions are kind of proposals that investors put forward generally on company strategy. So it's all about, on the climate ones, for example, it's about asking companies to make plans to commit to net zero and reduce their carbon emissions. But there's also resolutions on diversity. So asking companies to put out targets on different diversity factors or make plans. And resolutions generally have been a lot about disclosure so far, so asking for more information from companies, but increasingly they're actually asking for actions. So like, we want you to kind of meet these targets and make these plans and make your plans public. And it's a really powerful, so if over 50% of investors support the resolution, it becomes like legally binding and the company kind of has to do it basically. So it's a really powerful way of getting companies to do things, and there's a balance between getting enough investors to making the resolution kind of easy enough that investors will be like, okay, yeah, that's reasonable, we'll support it, and actually making a difference with it. Like, if it's really basic, then what's the point? Even if people support it, it's not going to make any difference. So it's that balance. And I think especially, so in my work at ShareAction, we worked out BlackRock, Vanguard, the big passive houses hold so much of companies, so they'll have such a big percentage that you really need to kind of try and get at least one of them on board on a resolution for it to pass, but then they tend to be the most conservative. So it's a really like interesting area of kind of it's so campaigning, even though it's in the kind of investor world. Even on the other side, it's still, we've got to make a campaign plan to make this work. We need to get on board, and that's nice.
Yeah, no, that's really fun. So you get to have that kind of excitement as part of it. Oh, that's really cool. Okay, 2 last questions. So first one of that is, do you have some calls to action for anyone that has got a pension and wants to have an impact with it?
So I think first, I guess, in a boring way, I'm really passionate about just pensions in general. So I'm just keen for people to find their pots, consolidate them if they want to, understand where their money is. And I think on that journey, you can then kind of learn more about how it's invested. And I think the main place to go is ShareAction. There's so much. They've built up such an impressive range of things and actions for people to take that I think take you on a journey as well, because not everyone wants to kind of move their pension pot into an ethical fund or whatever. It's quite, it's a good thing to do, but for some people that's too much, and actually you want to build up and kind of learn a bit more, and maybe go to an AGM, a company AGM, and ask a question, or email the pensions minister about something and join that, do those kind of things to kind of build up your knowledge. So I think, first of all, it's just like knowledge is power. Work out where your pensions are, and just go onto the ShareAction website and just learn a bit more about finance. I think as well. I think just knowing that your pensions are invested in the kind of companies they're invested in is like a massive thing, and is, you then know how the financial system works much better, and that's really powerful. And I think especially for women as well, I think having the gap of pensions between men and women is quite staggering, because women generally earn less and take gaps out of the labour market. So my message for women is also to make sure where your pension is, and you're contributing as much as you can, which is realistic, and those messages too, because I think it's quite empowering to be able to kind of say, right, I know where my pension is, I know I'm doing what I can, and it doesn't have to be crazy amounts, but I feel like it's your financial security for the future. So it's important.
Yeah. And then the final question is, what advice would you give to anyone, of any age, that feels like they want to have more of an impact, and they see the finance industry as somewhere where they could go and have an impact? What sorts of things should they learn? What sorts of skills should they develop, and where should they start?
So for me, I think I started off, I think it's kind of just building blocks, trying not to pressure yourself to get this perfect role and perfect internship or perfect experience. I remember, years ago, I just spent a day on an organic farm working learning how like crop rotation worked and how they, you know, they kind of naturally improved the soil. And just a day I helped, like, learned a bit, tidied their shop up for them, you know. But like little things like that, it was like, that was a really good learning experience. And like I remembered that it's, you know, it was quite simple. So I think things like that are quite accessible to everybody. You know, you can kind of go and volunteer for the odd day somewhere. And I think actually that type of knowledge is increasingly what we need. Like, there's a lot of kind of policy people, there's a lot of like overview sustainability people, but we need as much specific sustainability expertise as possible. So, you know, if you're really into recycling, like, can you volunteer at your council and, you know, learn a bit more what they're doing or whatever it is. Secondly, because ESG is getting more popular now, I think there is just naturally probably going to be people who see it as a kind of career opportunity and see it as a kind of good for them personally, which is fine. But, you know, really we want the people who are passionate about sustainability and impact and making a difference. So I think just to kind of message that, like, those people are going to be just increasingly needed, because there's so much to do and it's all quite complicated and new. So I think if you're passionate about it, just, yeah, feel reassured that you'll get to somewhere, because you're needed. Like, they're the people that we want, the people who are able to challenge and think about things differently. So yeah, that would be my suggestion.
Yeah. And do you think everyone needs to kind of really understand, like, finance and all the data and, you know, financial statements and all that kind of stuff?
Not really, no.
No.
I think actually there's so many people who are in finance who understand that already. Actually, we need more specialist sustainability expertise. I think that's probably more in demand. And, you know, I think you can understand the basics, and ShareAction has loads of resources on that. And, you know, this way you can kind of have a simple understanding of the financial system. But I think apart from that, it's that specialist actually topic expertise that is more important going forward.
Yeah. And are there any kind of particular good sort of entry level roles that you would recommend?
So I think starting at an NGO is a great place, because it's just it's a fun, nice place to be. And, you know, frankly, life is too short to kind of get on the treadmill like too soon. But I mean, it depends what suits you personally. It definitely suited me personally to have that grounding, have that like family, have that growth and development. And I think they are more accessible, that they tend to employ lots of younger people, and, you know, your passion is what they want. It's less about your skills and experience. So it's hard being outside of London now, I think. Like, I had to move to London because that's where the roles in the industry was. So I do feel for people who are outside London. And I guess, yeah, maybe it is about doing this the kind of slower route of building up volunteering expertise, experience and that kind of thing, and trying to do more things locally. But you kind of get there. It's just it's harder, I think, outside London, unfortunately.
Lauren, thank you so much. That was so insightful, so helpful, and I'm sure loads of people will be.
Oh, I hope so.
No, it was great, and I just hope that people will be inspired by your story and just know, all of these kind of roles and positions and this kind of impact is available to people. You know, if they want to take up this type of work and change the world. So it's great.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you. No, cheers. It was fun.